Welcome to the third installment of the terrific Every Other Thursday training video for koha-US. I'm Christopher Brannon for the Coeur d'Alene Public Library.
And I'm George Williams from the Northeast Kansas Library System.
How are you doing?
I'm getting by.
Good. That's an interesting office you've got there. I'm going to point this out.
Yeah, our offices are closed for the next couple of months for some work, some remodeling. But I like my office, so this is a picture of my office cast as the green screen background in Zoom. So
you're awesome. I love this. All right, so today we're going to talk about something other than jQuery. Today we're going to be actually talking about modifying slips. This is something that we did early on. I don't know about you, but it was something that we decided we were going to play around with, and found that you not only can you change the content of the slips, but you can add some logic to the slips to do some pretty interesting things.
yes,
So,
and I know that you used some, well, you are using some jQuery or some JavaScript for this, right?
yes, we're using some, I can't remember, I'd have to look at the code a little bit, but I think it's mostly just JavaScript. I can't remember if jQuery is active for the slips itself, but
I use it.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I know that with Template Toolkit, there's some even cooler things you can do with. There's some other cool ways you can do this with Template Toolkit too.
And you know,
and, I believe somebody is going to be doing a presentation about that at the upcoming koha-US conference online.
that is correct.
Yeah, somebody's going to be talking about this at the conference, so that'll be interesting to see.
You know, I did this a while back, and I'm sure there are ways to make this code a lot cleaner, but this is simply an example, a launching pad to help inspire people to do more with their slips. So if you find mistakes, if you find something that wasn't coded very well, feel free to improve on it. But I'm going to show you an example of what we did and walk everybody through this a little bit so that you have an understanding of how this is structured and works, and maybe you can do something better or do something different in a different slip. So
cool.
To begin with, my example is going to be on the hold slip. One of the reasons that we modified the hold slip was because the hold slip looked like this. It was just kind of basic, vanilla, out of the box. This is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm familiar with that slip.
And if you have a hold that is being transferred to another branch, that slip looks just like this. You'll notice that there is not much difference between the two slips. And for our library, it was a matter of identifying these slips quickly. You know, people are processing books left and right and not paying attention as much as they would like to, and these slips look almost identical. And if you're just doing a transfer, if an item is just going back home, that slip looks completely different. I didn't print up an example of this, but we wanted our transfers to look very different from things that are staying in-house. So we decided that we were going to make some modifications. I'm going to show you what that slip's going to look like when we get finished with it, and I'll talk about how we did that, and we'll go from there. So this is what our hold slip actually looks like. We wanted to have the expiration at the top, we wanted to have a partial name, and we wanted to have a partial card number on there. We also wanted it to say not checked out so that the patron didn't pull it off of the shelves, because our books are actually out for the public to grab. So we wanted to make sure that they knew these weren't checked out yet. So we put that terminology there. And the slip is long because we wanted it to stay in the book. We didn't want it to fall out easily. So that's why we added some length. And we were doing some problematic checking at one point. And so at the bottom, I always put where this book was coming from. This really helped us to track, you know, if a book showed up at the wrong place, we could track down easily by looking at the slip where it came from. So that's the explanation of this. This is very different from our transfers. If we have a hold, not just something that's going back home, but a hold that is being transferred to another library, instead of it looking like this, it's going to look like this. This is what we also model our for our transfer slips. So our transfer slip and our holds that are being transferred, those slips look almost identical. The thing is, the transfer is being transferred from one of two different slips. It's either being transferred from the transfer slip or it's being transferred from the hold slip. And so the hold slip is doing a dual function. And so we had to give some more logic so that that slip looked differently. We wanted it to look more like the transfer.
Right.
So
makes perfect sense.
Anyways, we're going to go into our slips. So I went into the tools, notices, and slips, modify notice. I'm actually modifying this slip called hold slip. So hold slip will handle the slips for holds, and it will also handle the slips for holds that are being transferred. So this is just the basic out of the box information that is in the hold slip. I'm going to copy some information, grab this real quick here, and I'm going to do this in chunks. So let me get rid of everything that's in there, and we're going to do this bit by bit. So here is the first part of what I put in there. First of all, I put everything within a font face of Veranda. We wanted to change the font to be more readable, so we just put a font in there. So I'm doing this in sections. This first section is going to be the structure, the basic layout for an item that is on hold at your library. It's not going anywhere, it's just on hold. And so this is, I'm adding divs to define these sections. I define this section as local holds, and I'm adding your basic HTML to dress things up. And I have sections that I give labels to that I'm going to go and insert information into. So right now, these are empty sections. Like this is an empty header for the patron ID. Up here is the div with an ID of expiration. This is where the expiration is going to be placed. This is where the card information is going to be to go. And right now I've put in some static information in there that is, it says last 2 digits of the card. This could be anything that you want. You just have to make sure that you update the logic to match that.
Right.
Then I have our information that says it's not checked out. Please check out this item before leaving. And then another section, oh, I've got another section in there that I didn't want to put in there that early, but this section is for the homebound. If we have patrons that are homebound, if we choose to use this, I have a little variable that I can turn on to match our homebound category, and it would make the slip look a little bit different, have a bunch of information on it that our outreach coordinator would want on the slip, and we can easily see, oh, this is for the outreach coordinator to handle, and they would take that from there. So we can identify that type of hold for the homebound patrons from regular patrons. So that is one section that we've defined.
Okay.
Pulling the next section. This section I call transferred hold. So any hold that is going to another library is going to be laid out in this style. So I have it say it's going to be transferred to, and it's going to have the branch name right at the top. So instead of an expiration and the patron name, it's going to have the branch name up there and saying that it's being transferred. And then all the basic information about the book. You'll notice I didn't have book information on the hold section.
Right, because that's about who it's for, not what it is.
Exactly. So this is more about the item that's being transferred, and if the slip gets pulled out, we know what book it goes to. And we have other information on there that we want to see. Oh, one thing that I did not point out in both sections, I have at the very bottom, I have a header or a heading of 3, and it has a margin set. This is what gives the slip the length. So the 400 px.
Okay.
That's what I used in order to give that longer slip, so that we had more of a slip holding on into the book. And then the information at the bottom, what branch it's coming from. And I have that at the bottom, slightly different in the transfer holds.
Because here you don't need to know where it's going, you need to know where it's from.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's that section. And I have another section, the final section, and then we'll close our font element as well. This is for expired holds. One of the things, this was a section that I added recently, and this one I won't have a demo slip for because I can't mimic an expired hold on the fly. But this section was an idea that I had a while back when we noticed that because we have our holds out on a publicly accessible shelf, people will grab their holds and usually they'll check them out. Sometimes,
not always.
Not always. Sometimes you'll get a patron that will grab the hold and forget to check it out, and they take it home, and we're looking everywhere for it. And then when they're done with it, they put it back in the book drop. We'll check it in, and it triggers the same hold again. So we've modified the check-in screen to get our staff's attention, so they know that this is an expired hold. This has already been triggered once. But if they, for some reason, are too busy and miss that information on the screen, the hold slip is not going to print out normally. It's going to say that this is an expired hold. It'll put the book information in there. It will not put the patron information on the slip, and that is another eye-opener to the staff, saying you don't need to put this back out on the shelf. Somehow they already took it and they put it in the book drop. So
right.
This is how we get their attention on that.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. And I've seen a huge improvement since we've done this with the slips. I have not seen expired holds that are really old and have already been picked up out on the hold shelf again. So this has made a huge improvement on that. So that is the structure of the different sections that we've defined. So we've got 3 sections, and there's a subsection in that first one for the homebound patrons. But I have 3 sections laid out for the slip. So it will print one of these 3.
Right, you just need the logic to tell them which one to print.
Now we need the logic, and this is where you throw in your HTML elements with a script that defines all of your information. Now, I am not going to go through in great detail about this because there's a lot to it. It can get overwhelming. Plus, your logic, what you're going to do can be something completely different. But I will break down some of the basic parts of this so that we have some basic understanding of what's going on here. I start off my script with some variables. I need to define some variables. By the way, I'll tell you one thing about setting up a script. If you don't get an element right in the script, what's going to happen is it's going to show all of your HTML. It's very easy to break if you don't code something right in the script. So you want to make sure that you test it before you throw it out there, because otherwise you're going to get this weird slip with all of the different sections that are not filled in, and people are going to be wondering what's going on. So this is where it gets tricky, and you have to make sure that you do it right.
Testing is good.
Yes. So I have a variable for a mask where I'm replacing characters. If I'm masking out part of a name or a barcode, this is where I define the character. You can have it whatever you want. This little character right here, I had it be an asterisk. I define a variable for the last name. I also, in fact, this should say Bart. I don't know why I do that. Old coding there. I have a variable for the variable for first name is going to equal that particular field. So the bar up here, it's the borrower's surname. And we define a variable for the card number. And this was important here because I would get some patrons that didn't have a card number yet, if they were of each name that's in the first name field. We put our first name and middle name in that first name field, and so this does very good at being just the first letter of each name in that field. So, if they had past the date information here, the trans information, I'm checking where this item is going. If it matches the current brand, where it's really important, it's going to find out whether this is a local hold, or if this is a hold that's being transferred to another branch. So if it's not being transferred, so that first section, if it's not being transferred, it's going to show this first section. If it is being transferred, it's going to show this section, the middle section.
So essentially the framework, you've got two things up here, and the logic is saying show this one or show this one.
Exactly. Let me get my highlight here. So this section right here is everything except for the last two numbers in the card. So if you wanted the last three, you would just so it's basically replacing everything till the last two or three or however many you set there. It's replacing that with that asterisk, and then this is where you add on the last two or three or however
the ones that you do want to show.
Yeah. The ones that you want to show, exactly.
So those numbers really ought to match.
Yes.
And if they don't match, it's going to be kind of a pain.
Well, if they don't match, I mean, I'm a stickler. I wanted, the card number and the masking to be the exact amount, so that's why I did that. I mean, you could put 5 asterisks in there and then tacked on however many you wanted. You don't have to be that much of a stickler on that. I just wanted it to be accurate, so that's why I did it that way. Okay. I do have a section in here that looks at patron category. This is where it's going to look at that local hold and find out if this is a homebound patron or not. Right now I have a category that does not exist in there called not home. We don't use this currently, but if we did, I would change this to match the category that's our homebound patron. So I would do this. And if the patron if I'm checking in an item and if this hold is for a homebound patron, that is going to make a slip that looks like this. So here it has its expiration date, but it says homebound patron hold, and it gives me more information than I would have in a normal slip that was going in on the hold shelf for a patron. So makes it very different. It's very different from our transfer, very different from hold. Again, you want to make sure that those look very different so that you can easily tell.
Right, so they can easily be captured by the outreach people.
And it's not this.
Yeah.
It is this. So that's what that's there for. So We don't use that, so I just turn that off with putting in a category that does not exist. So basically, it's just turning those divs, those sections that are wrapping those whole sections. It's changing the display status of those divs.
Right.
This section down here, where I had to do some comparison of our expiration dates. If it finds that the expiration date is old, it's going to turn off those first two sections. It's going to display. I had to format the expiration date the way I wanted it to be. So that's why it's broken up into pieces and
Right.
separated by slashes rather than hyphens. And it will display that that expired section with the expiration date. So that's basically this slip in a nutshell.
Cool.
I did want to show one section, one other section. I did talk about you could do your patron names differently. Here is the area that that you can modify. This partial name.
Right, and that's important for you guys because you have a self-service hold pickup counter.
Yes.
So if you didn't have a self-service hold pickup counter, you probably, maybe you don't need that at all, because this can really be customized for whatever you need the library situation you have to do for you.
Exactly. So I'm going to replace this section here. This is slightly different, where it's taking, it's not just putting in, throwing in the whole last name. In this case, it's doing the first three letters of the last name, and then it's masking the rest. It's a little bit different. I don't use a slice for this because I'm doing the first set part of the name, not the last part. With those slicing off the last few letters, I use slice. If I'm doing the first few letters of a string, then I'm using the substring instead.
Right.
A little bit easier. So I'm doing a mask of part of the last name, and then if the first name exists, I'm adding on a mask to that as well. I'm doing the first three letters in this case, and then masking the rest. And in that case, that would give you a result like this.
Right.
And so you can do this all different ways. If you wanted to kind of mash it together, if you just wanted letters and you didn't want any masking, you could do the first three letters of the first or the last name, the first three letters of the first name, and the last two digits of the patron card number, three or four, however you want. You can mash it all into one code that the patron has to decipher. I know that some libraries like to do that. So there's
Yes.
lots of different ways you could display this.
Yeah, and I've encountered quite a few libraries now with self-service hold pickup, and everybody seems to have a different way of deciding how they're going to do it. At the library I go to, it's alphabetized by the first three letters of your last name and then by the last four digits of your card number. And that's how you find your stuff on the shelf. So it's a little bit different everywhere.
We've come a long way with Koha in doing this because before Koha, we didn't have the luxury of this. We were handwriting slips put in books on the hold shelf. And when we got our hands on Koha, it's like, wow, we can do so much more. And we were able to create these slips. So this was my attempt at replacing that, so staff didn't have to handwrite slips for each hold that was going out on the hold shelf.
For me, it was important at the first library I worked at with Koha, where we got the patron names off of the slips because we ship things through a courier system, and we didn't want to be shipping patron information through the courier system. We wanted to make sure that, you know, all we're sending, essentially we're giving this driver the names and addresses and phone numbers of hundreds of people throughout our area. So we trusted our drivers, but you know, it's better not to have to trust people. It's better to just, come up with a system that doesn't require trust.
Keeps everybody honest.
Yeah, it keeps everybody honest when they don't have a choice.
Well, that is it for this example of modifying slips. Again, you can do this. You can modify a lot of your slips to your heart's content. It's just a matter of fulfilling the need of your library.
So when you were talking, let me say this: when you were talking, I looked up the schedule for the Koha Online Together 2020 conference. And on Tuesday, the 22nd at 9:30 Pacific Daylight Time, Joe Sikowitz from the Fenway Library Organization is going to be talking about, the title of his presentation is Making Slips Your Own, and it's from 9:30 to 10 Pacific Time.
So we had a little bit of a malfunction at the end of our recording. We chopped off the end, but the part you missed, George was talking about his presentation that he did a couple of years back on the same topic. He had a little bit different approach in his modifications, but along the same lines. We're going to put a link to that on the koha-US website next to the video link. So if you go to our video link, if you aren't there already, under the Learn section, get the right one here, and next to videos, when we add this video, you'll see our video. We'll put a link to that example and to the example that you saw in the video today there as well, so you have a place to refer to. You can see those examples in full and do with them as you may. And if you can improve on them, go for it. And let us know about your improvements. We'd love to hear back from you. Our next video is going to be presented by George, and he is going to be talking about enhancing the notes in reports with HTML. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining.